On this edition of SciTech Now, technology and social media come together to make rundown neighborhoods attractive again. Find out more about a world-renowned research lab pushing to close the gender gap in science. What could possibly make math fun? We'll take you to just such a place. Swim with a reptile that's been around for 160 million years. And discover how computer-operated lasers are revolutionizing an ancient art form. Coming up next on SciTech Now. Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and welcome to SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation. Let's get started by heading to the Motor City. Detroit is facing the largest bankruptcy of any city in America. Because of that, the city is using modern, innovative tools to try to save its neighborhoods and attract new residents. Blexting is a mix of technology and social media that maps urban blight with the hope of saving at-risk areas. Here's an excerpt from a PBS NewsHour segment by SciTech Now contributor Christy McDonald.
A demolition crew at work in northwest Detroit. This one crew will knock down up to 10 houses in a day. Ronald Garrison lives next door to this one, vacant for years. Trespassers looted it of anything of value.
The man down the street boarded it up, and they used to come rip the boards off and still go back in there, and he'd have to come board it up again.
There are nearly 80,000 dilapidated structures across the city of Detroit. A number so high because of scrappers, vandals tearing everything of value out of vacant properties, leaving them open to the elements. Once there's structural damage, the houses have to come down.
You have to watch your house even if you go on vacation. You can go on vacation and come back and your house be scrapped. So you got to watch it really 24 hours a day.
With the city bankrupt and operating under an emergency manager, Detroit's new mayor, Michael Duggan, is focusing on the demolition of the tens of thousands of houses stripped beyond repair.
And what kind of speed are we seeing, and what are the numbers that we're seeing?
Well, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, the city has historically knocked down maybe 50 houses a week. We're now knocking down 200 to 250 every single week.
Last year, the Obama administration and Michigan Governor Rick Snyder helped create the Detroit Blight Task Force. The task force brought together government, foundations, and private groups, some for the first time. Glenda Price co-chaired the task force.
You did not see impact because there was no concentrated strategy to go neighborhood by neighborhood where you could actually see a difference.
And you finally have it.
And we finally have it. You can't do one house on the east side, one house in Brightmoor, one house someplace else, and feel as though you've made a difference. You do 3 houses on one block, and by golly, you have made a difference.
I can only understand that there would be a staggering price tag to go with it, to remove them.
Approximately $1 billion.
The city has some of that money in the bank, but it's nowhere near enough to remove all the blight, which is estimated to take 5 years.
The first $50 million came from the federal government in TARP funds, and I got an application in now for another $50 million. I think if the federal government continues to see the progress we're making, they'll be supportive.
In the fight against blight, technology is key. Citizens are using a smartphone app that tracks changes in their neighborhoods for better or worse. It's called Blexting, short for blight texting. This is the crowdsourcing of information and comes courtesy of a couple of young Detroit entrepreneurs. Sandra Yu does community outreach for the program.
Loveland Technologies is a tech startup in Detroit, and they just geeks about property and wanting property to be used for the highest and best use.
Norma Heath is president of the West Euclid Block Club in the Midtown area of the city.
But this is a way that you know how to to see who owned the property. You see everything that you need to know.
We want Blexing to be part of what it means to be a citizen. You mow your lawn, you take out the trash, you bless properties in your neighborhood.
And I hover over here. Monique Tate of the nonprofit group Data Driven Detroit hosts some of the Blexting boot camps, training residents across the city.
So having this kind of information available leads to exactly what we want, data-driven decisions. So community groups can decide where are we going to focus our efforts and our attention, because they can easily pull up on the public dashboard a map of their specific neighborhood to see where are the vacancies.
What we recommended and what they are attempting to do is look at what we're defining as tipping point neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods where a little investment will stop the decline.
This is the Marygrove neighborhood, one of the Detroit neighborhoods that's at the tipping point. There's lots of streets just like this one, where you've got homes that are well taken care of, but sandwiched in between others that are vacant and run down. The city is now aggressively targeting homeowners, either clean up your property or lose it. And they're also offering incentives for people to buy homes like this one, to move in and to stay here. This Marygrove home is about to be seized by the Detroit Land Bank Authority. The land bank has been in operation for years with little notice. Now, the mayor has hired more staff, including attorneys, computer techs, and a communications director. Craig Foley left Detroit Public Radio to join the team.
Well, the Detroit Land Bank Authority, it's pretty simple, really. We are a place that is a clearinghouse for vacant property in the city of Detroit. Our goal is to either sell it to somebody that wants to live in it, auction it off to get somebody to live in it, and if we don't have any other options, we will demolish the property.
The properties to be auctioned are shown on the Land Bank website.
48201.
For city government, getting all this online is a new frontier.
We like to say that we sort of are building the car at the same time we're building the assembly line. So we really have to adapt and learn from each other and find new strategies, frankly, to get people back into the neighborhoods.
Auction winners can receive up to $25,000 to fix up their homes if they promise to live in them for 5 years.
Oh, wow, first try.
In Marygrove, Jay Meeks takes possession of the house he won for just over $8,000.
It's a decent size. I like it.
Meeks is 29, an upwardly mobile PhD student who grew up nearby. He lived on the East Coast, but recently returned home.
So this isn't Midtown, this isn't downtown, but this is Northwest Detroit. We are up here, and I'm excited about the opportunity for great things to come and my ability to contribute to them.
If the Marygrove pilot project works, other parts of Detroit might get financial incentives like this one. That is, if the city can recruit more charitable lenders to bring more people back into the neighborhoods.
At the moment, Syracuse is not in the Blexting network. However, the group is always looking to add more cities. Go to our website to find out how you can help include Central New York in this project. More women than men earn bachelor's degrees in the United States, but in the science and engineering fields, men still outnumber women. SciTech Now contributor Andrea Vasquez shows us how one science facility is trying to shrink that gap.
When neuroscientist Ann Churchland took a job at the renowned Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, she joined an elite population of scientists. Not only as a member of the world's top-rated lab in genetics and molecular biology, but as a woman approaching professorship.
There's a great interest in young women in science. It seems to persist all the way to the undergraduate level, but then something happens between then such that many women kind of leak out of the pipeline and don't make it to the senior professor level.
Churchland shared her experience and her research during the lab's annual celebration of women in science. The National Science Foundation reports that women comprised just 28% of working scientists and engineers in 2010, and that women science professionals were more likely than men to cite family responsibilities for working part-time or not at all.
Before I was hired here as faculty, I came out for a short visit that was about a month and a half in the summer, and my kids then were 3 and 5. And I would not have been able to come if it weren't for the daycare, because I would have had nowhere that they could go. Having that daycare really changed the trajectory of my life. It really did.
Yeah, put everything in the repo. Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory has long had female scientists on its faculty and was the research home of 2 of the 16 women to ever win a Nobel Prize in Science. Cold Spring Harbor's president, Bruce Stillman, said the lab is trying to combat the drop-off in the number of women scientists in higher positions.
Running your own lab is a really very demanding and tough thing to do, and it's very challenging for women who also want to have families, but we have women here who are very successful and have families, and we try to create a culture and an environment that supports them.
The lab's researchers are experts in cancer, neuroscience, biology, and genomics. It also publishes research papers and teaching materials for scientists and students in 215 countries, hosts training for high school teachers, teaches lab-based classes to tens of thousands of students, and hosts conferences for more than 12,000 scientists from around the world each year.
So this is Grand Central Station for science.
It's where scientist Anne Churchland's work at the lab focuses on what happens in the brain when we make decisions, and what that tells us about mental illness when the brain is not working as it should.
People are really enthusiastic about the brain. You know, everyone has a brain. Everyone's brain does weird things sometimes. You know, everyone wants to understand it.
Marilyn Simons, vice chair of Cold Spring Harbor Lab's Board of Trustees and president of the Math and Science Research Organization, the Simons Foundation, says this kind of research shows the promise of a deeper understanding of the brain.
We need to understand this. We have so many things that affect us, you know, with disease or mental health, that we need to understand the brain better.
Progress is ticking upward, and although women made up less than a quarter of all full-time professors with science, engineering, or health doctorates in 2010, that's more than double the rate from 1993.
Listen, we can always get better, right? So we will do more. And I think the most important thing is to encourage women that they'll be supported and they can do it.
Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory recently received 2 grants from the National Institutes of Health. That money will go to develop tools for neuroscience research. Ugh, that's what many of us say when we think of math. But that could be changing. Head to the National Museum of Mathematics and you'll find out math is anything but boring.
The National Museum of Mathematics, or MoMath as it likes to be called, is the only math museum in the country. Glenn Whitney, a Harvard graduate who later taught mathematics at the University of Michigan and worked as a quantitative analyst at a Long Island hedge fund, had the idea to open it after a small Nassau County math museum he once enjoyed with his family suddenly closed in 2006.
We sort of have this strange attitude toward mathematics, and I've seen it, you know, at a party. It's okay to say, hey, you know, I was terrible at math, weren't you? You know, that kind of thing. It's socially acceptable. You would never say, you know, I could never really read very well. It wouldn't happen. So we have a problem. It's holding us back, and I wanted to see if I could do something about it.
Whitney and collaborators have raised $23 million so far for the museum. And already the 19,000 square foot space with 30 unique math exhibits of 2 floors is attracting many more visitors than expected. Those exhibits are all about turning math from abstract concepts into things you can touch and feel and do.
What I need you to do now is stand here in one of these 2 red circles. I'll get the other one.
So tell me what this is.
Okay, well, this is called human tree. If you hold your arms up in the air, then you're going to see lots of copies of yourself. If you lean over onto that console and hit the word yes, then we'll actually combine our images. And there you go. Now you're on my shoulders, and I'm on your shoulders, and now the 2 of us are actually collaborating to create this pattern.
So what does this teach kids about math?
Well, first off, it teaches kids that math is not just about numbers, but also about patterns. It teaches them you can work together. Here we are working together to make this. And it teaches kids that beautiful things come out from very simple ideas.
An exhibit called Math Squared, an ever-changing display that detects your feet. Its goal? To make the math puzzles and games that emerge a kind of contact sport.
Yeah, if you step over there, yeah, see now that's your region, this is my region.
I like the math square that's behind me because it has a lot of angles and a lot of fun shapes and a lot of fun activities.
On the ground floor, the museum's target audience of 4th to 8th graders aren't the only ones lining up to ride the square-wheeled trikes.
I'll take the big one if you don't mind.
No, that's just fine. I've got more practice on this one.
So this is the one you always read about here.
Exactly.
What are we learning?
Well, so again, it's all about that surprise in mathematics. And if you just roll away, you don't even need to use your hands. And the point is, everybody knows that a square wheel can't possibly roll, right?
That's right.
And so we want to show here that with math, you can make things that seem to be impossible, you can make them possible. It's that element of surprise. It's that element of, like, I've never seen anything like that before. That's what we want to show kids here on the square wheel trike.
And you know what? It's a heck of a lot of fun.
All right. There you go. All right.
But for Whitney, there's a far more serious side to the exhibits, something that continues to motivate him.
We want to have experiences that can be entered at a visceral level. If we spark curiosity, then that illumination, it takes work like anything. Like figuring out how to play the flute better, you have to practice. So that illumination is going to come through the kind of attention that maybe can't happen in a museum, but we can light the spark here.
What do you hope people take away from a visit to the Math Museum?
I think the most important thing you can take away from when you come here is that you personally can be involved with math and you can create mathematical ideas and structures that are beautiful and exciting. You can make your own 3D sculpture at the Mathenaeum. You can make your own set of tiles that interlock in some unique way at Tile Factory. Everyone is able to be involved with math and do something beautiful and exciting.
If you want to go to the National Museum of Mathematics, we've got hours and directions on our website. The hellbender salamander is the largest aquatic salamander in the United States. It can grow to nearly 2.5 feet long. But since 2011, the salamander has been on the endangered species list. Here's how a zoo in St. Louis has been trying to make sure these big guys are around for future generations.
What we came to see at the St. Louis Zoo is not on display. It's actually behind the herpetarium where they keep the snakes and other assorted reptiles and amphibians. And if you come back here on the right day, you might get to meet Irene. Not the woman in the wetsuit, that's Shauna. Irene is the big salamander she has just fished out of its nest.
One of our female hellbenders.
How old?
We don't know her age because she was a wild collected adult. She could be anywhere from, 10 to 35, who knows.
She is one of the hellbenders living and, more importantly and amazingly, reproducing in what is no mere trough.
This is about your typical size of an adult.
These are miniature streams with flowing water, the speed of the current, the temperature, the minerals, all carefully controlled to match the hellbender's native habitat, the spring-fed waterways of the Ozarks. There were once maybe 10,000 or more of these guys in Missouri and northern Arkansas, but over time, for some or many reasons, they declined into the hundreds. At the same time, the survivors showed a high rate of severe injuries that hadn't healed properly, which could be due to a combination of many factors.
You'll notice that she's missing a right foot and a back right leg. About 70 to 80% of the animals that we find on the Ozark rivers have got some sort of anomaly.
A big part of this is simply preserving the species, biodiversity, the balance in the Ozark River ecosystem. But there's more to it than that. Hellbenders may not be as majestic or cuddly as some other endangered animals. After all, one of their nicknames is snot otter. But freshwater species are disappearing just as fast or faster, and amphibians are at the greatest risk. The hellbender has lungs, but underwater, it absorbs oxygen along those rippling folds of skin. And whatever is in the water, it absorbs that too. Think canary in the coal mine.
We depend on water just as much as these animals do. So if there are problems that are inherent in the water that are impacting hellbenders and other forms of wildlife, it's going to impact us eventually too.
So the St. Louis Zoo, the Missouri Department of Conservation, and other partners set out not just to study the hellbender, but to figure out how to breed them in captivity, raise the offspring, and put them back into the streams. Now, catching a hellbender is actually pretty easy. During the day, you find them lolling about in their nests under rocks. But getting them to reproduce in captivity, That would take 10 years. There were so many things to get right, so many things that could and did go wrong. The zoo started with an indoor stream. The males and females were doing their jobs, but the eggs just weren't getting fertilized. Every year the zookeepers would adjust this or that, but still no babies. So a few years ago they tried something else. They thought maybe an outside environment would help, and they built the outdoor streams. Roomier, lidded nesting boxes, half buried, comfortably spaced, mimicking the rock nests of the territorial hellbender. But still no success. So they went back to the water itself, looking at the ion and mineral concentrations, made a minor adjustment, and then waited to see if it would make a difference.
I remember the date, it was October 18th, 2011. We opened up one of the nest boxes out back and there was all these fertile eggs.
They didn't just hatch 63 baby hellbenders, they made history. It was the first time anybody had bred them in captivity. Now, every fall, the keepers, all certified divers, reach in the nest and remove a long string of eggs, which are then placed in these trays.
And we also shake the eggs or rock the eggs 3 times a day physically. And that's to take account what the male is doing in the bottom of the river. These are our newest babies.
There are now thousands of hellbenders in these tanks. 2 subspecies from 2 different Ozark River systems are bred separately and will be placed back into the streams where their parents were caught. And there they will feast on, among other things, crayfish. But they generally don't bother people. They're not poisonous, not aggressive. We're actually more interested in them than they are in us.
So for us, being able to help conserve a species that's right in our backyard, because less than 2 hours from here, you can be in the habitat of these guys.
You don't have to go to Madagascar for this,
You don't have to go to
do you?
Madagascar, and we've been able to make a big impact right here at home.
The Hellbender project in Missouri is a success so far, but only up to a point. The population is being increased, but what about the factors that caused them to decline so dramatically in the first place? Was it disease, climate change, pollution, people collecting them for pets? Were their nests being filled up with silt because of changing riverbank vegetation? The zoo-raised hellbenders are being put back at various ages to see at what point in their development they are most vulnerable. And that means tracking, counting, measuring, at least for the next 15 years.
We need to be paying attention to what's going on in these wild situations, just because eventually it's going to work its way up the chain to us.
Fossil records show the hellbender salamander has been around for more than 160 million years. Up next, when we think of sculpture, we think of the masters like Michelangelo and Rodin. But today's artists are using technology to transform the art. Take a look.
At the Digital Atelier in Mercerville, creating sculptures is something out of a sci-fi film, replacing hands and chisels with computer-operated machinery and lasers.
Essentially, we're a large-scale model-making business. We run everything via digital files, transposing that into what we can use on machines to do the same thing that was done for years by hand.
Clients include artists like Jeff Koons and Kiki Smith, and companies like Disney Pixar.
It all starts with a maquette or a figure that someone wants to enlarge. We laser scan it, create a 3D model on the computer, clean up the model, and then convert that model to software that the machine can read and mill the part in whatever material they like.
The Henry Moore to the people in the Renaissance all worked with small models first so they could visualize what they might need at a grand scale. Plus, it's just not affordable to work at 10 feet and not like your project.
At the Digital Atelier, though, technology means a more precise product and a lot of time saved for artists.
It's really fast. I mean, if you're a sculptor and you're doing your own work, it can take months to do an enlargement. And we can generally do like a 10-foot enlargement in about 5 days.
Lash is not just a practitioner of the process, he's a pioneer in the field.
I'm a sculptor, and I worked at Johnson Atelier for 20 plus years, helping run their foundry and their enlarging department. I had the idea that we could do this through computers and some of the new machinery that was just starting
The shop, which was originally part of the nonprofit Johnson Atelier, created jobs and turned profits at such a rate that it needed to branch off as a for-profit endeavor.
The first couple of years it was a lot of trial and error, but once we got going, the clients just started pouring in.
And while the Digital Atelier has found great success with their technology, they can't wait to see what's next.
Kids are being taught some of the software now at much younger ages.
Someday people are just going to think about it, and then a little printer in the background is just going to print it out for them.
But in the meantime, with orders coming in from all over the world, Lash and Renew will have plenty to keep them busy.
Digital sculpting will be used to create the world's largest statue in northwestern India. Once it's completed, it will stand 597 feet tall, about twice the height of the Statue of Liberty. That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. For more information on science, technology, and innovation, visit our website at wcny.org/SciTechNow. And you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, we learn about what it takes to bring a river back to life. Discover why some people are saying personal data is more valuable than gold. Find out how technology is making sure our grandparents have their own gadgets. And Hari Srinivasan sits down with Brian Hecht to talk about the latest on startup companies. I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.